On this episode of The Prediction Trade, a veteran Las Vegas oddsmaker and expert motorsports handicapper reveals who gets respect, how betting lines are set, and what his best bets are for Sunday's Coca-Cola 600 and Indy 500.
All you false pretenders and your freaky contenders trying to be the first. In my own opinion, you am not defending. You are the worst.
Welcome back to the Prediction Trade, where if you can trade it or bet on it, you can bet that we'll talk about it. I'm Jeff Joseph, editorial director of Luckbox magazine, joined by Mike Reddy, an editor at Luckbox and the producer of the Prediction Trade. Hey, Mike, did you take in the Pga Championship this weekend?
I was just going to say, Jeff, there's no doubt in my mind that you had to have seen what happened. Of course, I tweeted that Phil Mickelson was actually really performing well at the time. And sure enough, look who the PGA champion turned out to be, Phil Mickelson.
Yeah, of course, it made us think about Paul Motti, a previous guest, when he gave us a master class on betting the Masters. He had Phil Mickelson as one of his long shot value bets. And I know he and so many golf wagers like to throw Mickelson on for a couple bucks just to see if they can get a large payout on a value bet. So I know the books paid out a lot of money on Mickelson. He was an outlier with really high odds. So we'll definitely ask our guest today about that. And then there was also Monaco, the Grand Prix, and we can talk to him about that as well. So Mike, let's introduce today's guest.
Joining us on the show today is 20-plus year veteran of the Las Vegas sportsbook industry, Micah Roberts. Micah spent 13 years as Station Casino's book director, and he's often regarded as the nation's premier NASCAR betting expert. As a Vegas bookmaker, he was the first to offer expanded NASCAR betting. If you want to know how serious Micah is, his top pick, Brad Keselowski, won the Geico 500 at 14-1 odds about a month ago. He also correctly predicted the first two races of the 2020 season. You can find his picks in college football and hoops, the NFL, MLB, NBA, and NASCAR at sportsline.com.
Oh, that's terrific. I think we got the right guest. Welcome, Micah. How are you?
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, guys. Yeah, that was quite the introduction. It's almost like someone prepared that for, like I wrote it. It was beautiful.
How about that? Well, Mike's voice does a lot for any introduction too, I have to admit, but we definitely have the right guest on. Mike and I were talking about the second season of this podcast. The first season was really devoted to political trading activity, and it's an area that we're really comfortable and well-versed and active traders in the political prediction markets. But in the second season, we've spanned out. We're looking at different betting markets and prediction markets, including sports wagering. I've been a long time sports wagerer, but there's so many new markets that have been enabled as a result of legalized gambling and wagering. And that's really what we've been doing, is drifting into markets where we've never placed wagers before. And in the same way, a couple months ago, we said that about golf, and then we got a good schooling by one of our prior guests on how to bet the Masters. And this is the same thing applies here. We have not bet on auto sports ever before, and we're looking forward to being taken to school today. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, it's a blast, and I've had the opportunity to do it since the early '90s as far as setting numbers and odds. But at the same time, I would, of course, bet at other sports books. At the same time, I felt I had a little edge over everybody because of the way I was approaching it from a different point of view. They used to just throw the odds up without little regard for practice or qualifying, and it was pretty much almost the same odds every week. So when you start beating somebody at something, you start to get them to think and get them developed a little more. I can't just be throwing these out here blindly anymore because they're picking me apart. And you find certain niches with certain drivers or certain teams at a moment on a track or something, and there would be an edge. And now it's just so much more refined. People are really taking care of it. You shouldn't put something up available to bet if you don't know what's going on. And that's kind of what was going on with the few books that actually offered auto racing. in the early 90s.
That's a great place to start, because, as Mike mentioned at the outset, you were 13 years the book director at Stations Casino in Las Vegas. So let's talk about that in general before we get into auto sports wagering. In that role, give us an idea of the day in the life. What are you doing every day as the book director of Stations Casino?
Treating the money like it's my own. And with that, I mean like just being extremely careful, having the staff regimented to follow everything, update everything, respect the money. Sometimes you'd have the public betting heavily on one side, but the most respected bettor that you deal with comes in and bets that side. So even though you're long on the public money, you want to be on the side that this guy has. And so you would move it according to his play rather than the money. So say I've got $50,000 in public money, but this guy only bet 5,000. I like his play better. I go with him. I move it a half point his way or a point rather than uh, examine the money that I've taken in, the $50,000 from the public. So I lose more if the public wins, but I like to be on his side because he's smarter. Do you understand kind of that meaning? Like,
I do, but you've already thrown a wrench into my conventional wisdom about wagering with after, several decades of it. I thought I knew what I was doing here. So that let's unpack that. There's a couple things that I find really interesting in there. Of course, the way bookmaking works in general is that your goal is to, well, I believe the goal was to achieve a balanced book. The whole idea is that the VIG, whether it be 10% or whatever the vigorous
but it
is.
never happens that way. It never, nothing's ever, 50-50 equal. It just doesn't work that way. Ideally, yes, that's the way you want it, but no.
But that's interesting in itself. But on top of that, you've just added another dimension in it that you essentially segregate smart money versus dumb money.
Of course.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the guy hits 60% of the time, and he wins, and you respect the money. That's what you just call it, respected money. It's, you'll have 5 to 10 guys like that you're dealing with, and every supervisor in the book knows who they are, and we follow them, and we'd rather be on his side than the public side because the public generally, I don't want to be rude, but I mean they're just wrong most of the time, and so that's one item there. You always want to be at the right number, whatever that may be, and that respected money will help you get to that number by sharing. So he's betting, he's trying to beat you, and he usually does. But we're going to use his bet to tell us where that number is. If the number's 4, he laid it. He knows he got a good number. Now it should be 5. You know what I mean?
I do. I do. And just to back up for listeners in general, what we're talking about here, the notion of balancing a book is that in the perfect world, um, if if the way a book makes money is on the losing bets where they pay 10%, $100 loses 110, or $100 on an even money bet, or $100 pays $100 to win.
Mm-hmm.
That means you're making the 10% on the losers. So you ideally want to balance the book with equal money on both
Yeah.
sides. So, but what you're adding to this equation is that you treat public money differently than smarter money. Is that down to the betting level? So you know who the bettors are, you know what wagers they're placing, and you respect certain bettors more than the aggregate.
Yeah, absolutely. If
So what's so interesting to us, we're editors of Luckbox magazine, where our focus is on probability and statistics. We're actively involved in the prediction markets, where the basis of those markets is the so-called wisdom of the crowds. And there's a lot of academic research that's compelling that shows the history of the wisdom of the crowds for crowdsourced data aggregation and predictive capabilities of forecasting, et cetera. You're saying the wisdom of the crowds is not the fundamental driver of a line making book in Las Vegas.
with human, some of the newer books, the European books, they don't even have bookmakers anymore. They kind of let a robot and a machine kind of dictate what is what, and they don't value the respected money as much in there. Uh, whatever calculations that come out. So that's changed a lot from, the old Vegas way where, you have, you're moving a number based on what happens. You have to move it, and a lot of it's now automated. And for the worse, I don't think that's better. But that's European bookmakers have come in and wow, 2 years they have just crushed it. And meanwhile, the Las Vegas books are kind of. It's almost like, wow, are we dinosaurs? What happened? What just happened in the last 2 years that FanDuel and DraftKings and everybody has come over to America and completely just changed the industry overall. So we'll see. Some of the books, circa Superbook in Las Vegas, are still killing it. But I mean, Caesar's Palace was taken over by William Hill. Chain resorts, just accumulation, and it's completely changed the business as we know it.
So where does that provide the opportunities for today's active
Well, it's
gambler?
hard. But the splits, for instance, okay, so generally in Vegas, you mentioned $1.10 each way on a point spread. That's the way it's always been. And if you do anything different, it was always perceived like, what are you guys doing? Like, sometimes MGM Resorts, they went to a 20-cent split on totals, or 25 cents, something like that. But the norm was $1.10. But now you're seeing FanDuel and DraftKings make it acceptable for baseball, or just having it out there like a 23-cent split when it should be a 10-cent split. So on a baseball game, you're laying $1.16 on one side and you're laying $1.12 on the other side. That is just, to me, it's just fundamentally wrong. Like, it's rude to treat your customers like that. And they're doing it. They're just like, whatever, just don't bet with us. And you just have to deal with it.
Well, I've noticed at the outset, Mike and I were chatting a little bit about the PGA Championship this past weekend, where we saw Phil Mickelson at age 50 win, the oldest to win a Masters since 2013. And looking into it a little bit more, because I was really curious about the odds that he went off at, and it seems like the range was 200 to 300 to 1. That's a big range, right? Caesars, you mentioned William Hill. They went off at 200 to 1. But
Circa Sports had him 265 to 1. And it's just when after he's won and he's done it. But I mean, the setup to this was the turmoil he's had all season. I mean, he's been really bad. And to come up the way he did is just incredible. I'm pretty happy for him. He went to ASU, where
oh, is that right? Yeah,
John
back in your
Rahm.
hometown.
So yeah, the city was pretty excited yesterday.
Sure. Is that variation among lines, among betting books? Is that common to see such a large range? For example, I know that you mentioned DraftKings earlier. They took $1,000 bet right before the first round at 300 to 1.
Wow.
So, obviously that paid 300,000.
No, that's what Circa does. So the theoretic hold at Circa, I think they had like 150 golfers listed or something, but they had a theoretic hold of like 15, 16%, which is just unheard of on a field.
What does that mean, a theoretic hold?
It's like if each one win, you theoretically, you get a hold percentage of what you should win if everything's bet equal. And so that's kind of the number you use. So when you put it in the machine, you keep getting a theoretic hold number that puts up. And so for a bettor, you want to go where that lowest theoretical hold is. And that's certainly Circa Sports. They do not mess around with giving bad odds. It's a competition, basically, to have the best odds on the board for pretty much everybody. So, that's football, basketball, baseball, all the future markets. They have the best in the world.
Do they get rewarded in terms of market share as a result of that? Are they essentially buying the business?
Yeah, they get a lot of publicity, and it's to the point now where everybody in Las Vegas pretty much knows, if you want to bet a future, do not bet or take what Caesars is giving you. Or actually, William Hill does a pretty good job with it too, but not as pronounced or refined as Circa. What they do, they're basically saying, pretty much anything you want to bet on a futures, you should bet here, or at least check us out. and compare, and it's worthwhile. So them and the Superbook, Westgate Superbook, do the best on the futures like that. But
Well, that's a good listener note in terms of the right platforms to be pulling your odds from. I noted also that because of the real time wagering, that now you can bet live between rounds, and Mickelson got off to not only you mentioned a rough year, but a really uneven front nine also. At which point he was up to 420 to 1 on FanDuel, and they booked a couple bets on him at that level too. Yeah, so those are pretty amazing numbers. Interesting to note that William Hill at Caesars has him at 66 to 1 for the US Open going forward. Does that sound like the right number?
yeah, I saw the Superbook had him 50 to 1. I can't imagine they did everybody. I mean, because everybody bets Mickelson anyway. He's like a popular like Tiger Woods.
Sure.
He's always loaded. It's always Tiger, Mickelson, 1-2 in most tickets written, most bet amount. And for a while now, the books have been scooping all the money in the golf, but this one here, I think, burned a lot of the sports books because of obviously the payout. I mean, you just can't make that up. The $5 bets, the $10 bets of the average guy that watches golf and bets every week. That you just throw $5 on Phil Mickelson just because. It's just what I've done for 30 years. I bet $5 on Mickelson every tournament, whatever. And so
Sure.
there's a lot of guys like that. And so I think the books got hurt pretty good on Mickelson winning.
Yeah, that's the rumor. That's what I've seen. So back to the notion of following the smarter money.
Yeah.
How many of these? Well, first of all, I imagine that's specific to certain sports also, right? I mean, there's those that you identify as the smart money in auto sports or versus horse racing versus baseball, football, etc. How many names are there? Are we talking a handful, dozens, hundreds? Are there how many names are you closely
Well, you
watching?
have so you know who Billy Walters is, right?
Yes. Yeah.
He had a huge syndicate in Las Vegas and had guys. So my vision, I don't know this, but my vision was that he would have like an office and he'd have a chalkboard with all the sports books on it. And then he'd have certain guys dedicated to one book. And then he would send out a text or a message, get this at this number and see what you can get. And then you would know him as Billy's guy. And Billy was so good, we had to have a conversation with them and say, hey, you can only have one guy here at a time. You can't run everybody in and try to double, triple pop us, but you can have one guy. And it was understood. He had one guy, it was a runner, and we would allow him. But then every once in a while, they would get greedy and pretend like we're not watching. And then they'd send in two. I go, come on, we just told you. Now you guys are both out. And you play these cat and mouse games because he's respected so good. We have to babysit and watch everything he does because he's not our friend. He'll take the money right from it. Like, he does not give a damn. And he's betting $1 million a game, spreading the money around different books and stuff. So that was the one guy we always had to really pay attention to.
In terms of the handle from auto sports wagering, what's the largest amount that's become as a percentage of the overall pie? I would imagine, it's still a fraction.
Not even 1%. I mean,
right. Just because, well, in fact, educate us from top down. Is it still in the US anyways? Is it the NFL first and then what follows?
NFL, college football, NBA because it's longer, and then baseball, hockey's on the bottom level of the major sports. And then of late, what's happened in the last, the last 15, 16 years is the UFC has supplanted boxing as the top sport. I mean, it's big. I mean, it's these cards, they have such big, meaty cards. People play the parlays with them. They mix them all around. They just average regular guys betting, $1,000 on a fighter, and they have a blast with it. So that's something that's really taken off as far as handle wise.
You've been a hot hand, as Mike pointed out at the outset. You've been nailing some of your forecasts in autosports, and we're going to come back in a moment. And actually ask you to give us names of winners in the
Yeah,
upcoming races,
sure.
particularly the Indy 500 and the NASCAR Coca-Cola 600 coming up this weekend. But before we do that, I'm sure you had an opportunity to take in Monaco, the Grand Prix for Formula One this weekend. Or although, admittedly, I can't claim any expertise in autosports wagering. I can, as of recently, claim fandom, at least with respect to Formula One. And a lot of that I would attribute to the Netflix series, which is called Drive to Survive, which has
Oh, really?
become number one globally in Netflix rankings. I was doing a little advanced research just to see the impact, because if you've seen it, it's probably the most brilliant product placement marketing I've ever seen, because it's a docudrama series all about Formula One racing. It's had 3 seasons so far. They're going to do a fourth, and the seasons basically takes a look at the 10 teams in racing, which are dominated by names like Mercedes and McLaren and Ferrari and Williams and Haas, and names that have been around the sport forever. And of course, each team has only 2 drivers. So this is a sport that has 20 names in it that rotate from year to year. Most of these 20 drivers have known each other since kids. But I was looking at the impact of the series, and it's interesting to note, not only is this the number one globally ranked show on Netflix, but it has increased engagement with the coveted 16 to 35-year-old demographic, uh, adding 2.7 million new fans per month to Formula One. That's how successful this has been. They're going to film their fourth season. 40% of all the new fans added to Formula One are under the age of 35, and a lot of it's the identification they're having with some of the younger drivers
Yeah.
like Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris and things like that. But it's been an amazing thing on the sport. It brought me into the sport, so I was up at 5 a.m. Watching Monaco this weekend, and I have to admit, and I'm really curious of your thoughts about it, because I've been watching the circuit now for the last year and a half. And Monaco obviously has a lot of cachet and sexiness associated with the actual race, but the reality is it was it was kind of a boring race. And I say that because there were so many. You look at the track, right? There's 19 turns. It's 78 laps on a 2 mile track. 2 mile track. There's that whole chicane thing going with hairpin turns. So you've got to take your top speed down to 30 miles an hour. And as the size of Formula One cars have increased apparently by 65% since the 1950s, you can't get by these cars. There's no overtakes. So the whole race is about managing your tires or managing your pit stops. If it wasn't for some real excitement in the race, in the way that there was just a miserable pit stop by Mercedes. They couldn't get a tire off, and Bottas was essentially removed from the race, and Leclerc didn't even start,
Hmm.
who had the number one pole position. But aside from that, there were no overtakes. 78 laps, 2 hours later. I have to say, for someone who enjoys Formula One, I think the dirty little secret, at least from my opinion, is Monaco's just not that exciting. These cars are too big, and there's too many turns for
Yeah.
there to be real overtakes.
Good point. And it's you've got 5 races so far. Hamilton's won 3. Max Verstappen has finished runner up in all 3 of those, and then he won the other 2 races. So there's no parity there. I mean, compared to Indy or NASCAR, the cars are beautiful. The track, I mean, I love Monaco, but it's the aesthetics. I'm watching the tunnel. I'm watching the yachts in the harbor. I'm watching all this other stuff beyond the racing itself. That's good enough for me, and I don't even care that nobody's passing or there's nothing like that happening. But it's top heavy, and it's not as it's not possible for somebody to have an upset like you could have in Indy or NASCAR.
Yeah, it comes all down to qualifying. Mike did a little bit of research that we'll share with you after the break about pole positions, and boy, they sure make a difference in terms of the outcomes, particularly in F1. For those reasons. But we'll talk about that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up our conversation about bookmaking and get right into NASCAR's upcoming Coca-Cola 600,
Okay.
your picks, and the Indy 500. We'll be right back.
Want a little more luck in your life? Get Luckbox, the control freak's guide to life, money, and probability. Named Best New Magazine of 2019 and 2020. Luckbox is the must-read magazine of active investors, big thinkers, side hustlers, entrepreneurs, gamblers, data geeks, and risk takers. You can buy Luckbox on newsstands, but with this special offer, receive a 10-issue digital subscription absolutely free. Visit getluckbox.com/TPT to receive the award-winning Luckbox in your inbox. Don't rely on luck. Get Luckbox. Learn more at getluckbox.com/TPT.
And we're back with the prediction trade with Micah Roberts. Micah is our special guest today. He's a veteran of Las Vegas sports bookmaking and a NASCAR betting expert that has been a hot hand lately in picking winners. And we've asked him to join us to handicap the upcoming NASCAR 600, the Coca-Cola 600 race that's coming up this weekend. It's a double header. It's also the same day as the Indy 500 coming up as well. So Micah, Mike and I mentioned earlier that we don't have any experience in auto sports wagering. So walk us through it from the beginning. If you enjoy watching auto sports and you want to put a wager down, what do you look for? How do you handicap auto sports race, particularly big races like this? Just kind of walk us through the process as new gamblers.
Yeah, this week is fun because we're going to get some practice time, 15-minute practice on Friday, and then there'll be qualifying as well. And so this is a change that we've had for most of the year, where we've had the grid already predetermined and no practice. So the cars have been coming off the hauler. They have to be perfect. They have to be fast and ready to go. And if you're not, you're going to fall out and you're not going to do pretty well. And so far, there's been a couple guys, and it's also good to know that this is the race package with 550 horsepower. So there's spacers in there that make it harder for acceleration. The cars I ran yesterday, most of the cars yesterday at Texas and the smaller tracks have 750 horsepower. So they have there's a lot more acceleration, obviously more speed. But they've only ran this package 4 times this year. The last one was at Kansas on May 2nd. Kyle Busch won that. So we'll go through here. Homestead was the first one. William Byron won that. Las Vegas was Kyle Larson. And Atlanta was Ryan Blaney. So you want to look at the guys at those tracks. Probably Atlanta resembles Charlotte the most. So they can use all the winning setups and everything that was good from Atlanta and try to copy that, mimic it for Charlotte. Sister tracks, both 1.5-mile tracks. The thing about Charlotte in this particular race, so it starts at 6 Eastern? Starts at 6 Eastern, daylight, then it goes to dusk, it goes to night, 3 different settings, which 3 different setups that you have to have for your car. And you have to do this on the fly to maximize, because it gets cooler, the track's cooler, and everything changes. So the driver who does that best will win. I can't tell you that, but I can tell you who is probably, the guy that should be favorite without a doubt is Kyle Larson, because all he does is lead like 100 laps in every race using this particular package. So he should be, if you can get 5-1 on him, he's probably going to have the best car, and he'll probably have to have either some trouble, a tire go out or something for him not to win. That's how good he is on this.
So Kyle Larson is your primary pick for the Coca-Cola 600?
Yes.
And the race that he won earlier this season, what did he go off at for that race, approximately?
Probably like 6-1, 7-1.
About
I mean,
6
he's been fast from the get-go in every one of these races using this package. 100 and what did he lead here? Oh, he led 5 laps at Homestead, 103 laps at Las Vegas, 259 laps
Jeez.
at Atlanta, and 132 laps at Kansas. I mean, there's a pattern there, right, guys? I mean,
But
This guy
that's an
gets out
outrageous
front.
pattern. So why would his price only be around 5 or 6 to 1 considering those numbers?
Um, I don't know. I haven't seen anything. I'm figuring if I can find 5 to 1, I'm taking it.
Sure.
I mean, it might
Uh,
be 9 to 2, 4 to 1, but then you also have, so the Hendrick Motorsports, the 4 drivers there are all going to be good. His teammate won at Homestead. Um, Alex Bowman was third at Atlanta, and Chase Elliott, he won uh, the last time they were on the mile and a half oval at Charlotte. Chase Elliott won that race last year. That was they raced 2 times in a week there in Charlotte, just because they had a makeshift schedule with COVID and everything. So that's the team you want to look at right out of the gate, and you're going to get probably 18 to 21 on Bowman and William Byron. And Chase Elliott won yesterday. He was 8 to 5 favorite and cashed in. And then you want to look at the Gibbs guys. So Kyle Busch won at Kansas the last race. He is going to be good. I don't think he's ever won the Coca-Cola 600 either, so that would be a big deal for him. All the Gibbs cars, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex has had some of the most dominating wins in Coca-Cola 600 history. He's 2-time winner. He's going to be good. And who else? One other driver from the Ryan Blaney. He's better than both his Penske teammates with this particular package. Both.
Well, I'm going to ask you to kind of repeat those names again as a summary for our listeners, but let me back up for a second. What I'm hearing in terms of your own handicapping, and someone who's obviously set the book pricing on a NASCAR race for 12 years as a casino director, is that among the primary factors here are things that are very similar to what you look at in golf, which is, form and the course, right?
Yep.
I'm just hearing that in your underwriting. Is that fair to make that comparison?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's golfers that, you get your home course, you're from Liverpool and you're playing on the Liverpool course in the British Open. And yeah, you should have an edge. You've been playing on it since you were 7. I mean, come
Well,
on.
you were also speaking to a comparable track, and a prior performance
Yes.
on a similar track would be worthy of note.
Exactly. So that's why the closest to compare is look at the results from Atlanta, because it's their sister tracks, Speedway Motorsports, mile and a half. Atlanta's a little more abrasive with the asphalt, but still, the notes should work and help figure out.
When you say sister track, does that mean it is an identical track
Kind of.
in terms?
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, none of them are right. They all got their nuances that make them special, but they're basically cookie cutters. They look alike.
I see. And does, in the way that in F1 tire management is, the compound management is a big issue. Does that come into play in NASCAR?
It has a few times. So let's go back to last season. They had a tire compound that they were using on the fast tracks, and we had a string of winners that were like, what the hell's going on here? And I find out they have a tire compound that just doesn't wear. So when everybody's pitting like a normal guy would do, he just took fuel, didn't take tires, and he gets out first and he wins the races. So we had what was it? Austin Dillon, Cole Custer, and Kurt Busch. There's a trio of wins at mile and a half tracks using the hard tire compound that did not wear. So yeah, you don't need to take tires on this last pit stop. And all of a sudden you shuffle past 7 other guys that pitted that took tires. Your car's not as good, but the tires didn't wear. You didn't need them. And drivers won races like that. Big payouts. Cole Custer last year, that was 125 to 1. Austin Dillon was 75 to 1. So yeah, that's important. I don't think they're using that this week though, but
Let's recap those names again, because we want to move on to the Indy 500. But once again, from top down, first of all, let's talk about your top 5 names.
Okay, we'll go Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch figured he's going to be probably 12 to 1. William Byron, about 20 to 1. Alex Bowman, about 20 to 1. Kyle Larson, lucky to get 5-1, and Ryan Blaney at he'll probably be 12, 14-1. And what I do is so yesterday, for instance, Chase Elliott, he was my top pick, but not my top money earner. He basically was like an insurance investment. And then I had other guys at 20, 30, 40-1 that I was really rooting for better, but I basically broke even with Chase Elliott 8 to 5. Does that make sense? Like,
Right, absolutely. So
yeah.
as a hedge bet, and is that pretty common? Is that a good way to bet auto sports is by taking a higher payout and then hedge it against something that's a higher probability?
Yeah, I hit a couple, William Byron before already this year, Alex Bowman, and the same type of thing. Like I had one of the favorite, I had Kyle Larson, but I didn't want him to win
Hmm.
um,
Right, because of the payout.
because of the value. So I'm rooting for the 20-1 or the 30-1 ticket to come in, like Christopher Bell when he won at the Daytona Road Course.
Right.
Um,
Well, taking Larson out of the equation as the chalk, as the favorite, where would be the one higher value bet that you think if you could only pick one? What's that
I,
name?
I think Kyle Busch, search
Kyle
around.
Busch.
Yeah, Kyle Busch and then William Byron, both 20-1, and Alex Bowman. They're all right there in the same stratosphere. So that will be what I'm going for. And then of course I'll look at practice on Fridays. I don't look at the top time. You look at the top time, it's just one lap. That doesn't mean anything. I look at the 10-lap average. That tells me everything I need to know about a driver and how he can sustain that speed for a longer time. So that'll be the first thing I look at practice and see who was the fastest in the 10 consecutive lap.
And how much will the pole position come into play for you?
Not much. I mean, this is 600 miles. I mean,
Yeah.
the starting grid is, I mean, you can make up all it. If you're fast, you're not going to get bogged down like you might in Formula One or
Right.
whatever, just because you're stuck in traffic and on a street. Like the racetrack here, it fans out pretty good. So if you have a good car, you'll move to the front pretty quickly.
All right. Well, we're going to come back and we're going to take one more short break, Micah, and we're going to come back and ask you for the same rundown of the Indy 500, your top 5 names, and your one best value pick. We'll be right back. Okay, and we're back once again at the prediction trade with Micah Roberts, our special guest and NASCAR expert, who's going to run us through the Indy 500 coming up this weekend. Micah, I've been to the 500 several years. Used to go a lot with my friends in our early 20s, and I spent all my time on the infield and paid very little attention to the race. Uh, it was a lot of fun. Now I'd be looking at it in a different way. I still continue to watch the race, but I really don't know what I'm looking at as someone who doesn't follow uh, Indy racing very, very closely. You do. You've made a living of it. I know Mike. Mike, you want to start by setting up the race for Micah, and then we can ask Micah what he likes and what we should be looking at.
Well, sure, Jeff. Like the Coca-Cola 600, the 105th running of the Indianapolis 500 is going to take place this Sunday at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which, fun fact, is actually the largest sports venue in the world. So that's kind of cool. I didn't know that prior to doing the research for this. The starting lineup is featuring 11 rows of 3 drivers each. Now, those positions were established through 2 days of qualifying. Worth noting, in row 1, in the first pole position is number 9, Scott Dixon. In the second position is Colton Herta. And in the third position is Rinus VK. This year marks the 4th time that Scott Dixon earned the Indy 500 pole position.
Yeah, and Scott Dixon is clearly the big name that's getting the most attention. I know that there's 8 prior Indy 500 winners in this year's lineup. Um, but Micah, what say you?
My model has been pretty good over the last few years. I got lucky based just looking at some practice times. Alexander Rossi a couple of years ago, I had at 80-1, and it was pure luck. It was just he was, looked good in some practices, and I was like, okay, that's good. I've thrown out Scott Dixon, even though he's with Chip Ganassi Racing, which basically it's Ganassi and Penske, and everybody else, good luck. However, when you look at
No, and Scott Dixon is going to be approximately
4-1,
at DraftKings he's plus 350. At FanDuel he's plus 430. So 3 to 5 to 1.
he's like that every year, and it's the same story every year. Ends in bad luck. I guess he won in 2008. I mean, it's a long time.
In 2008, he won from the pole position, which he has this time.
Yes.
That was the 92nd running back in 2008. But the pole position and the number one driver is not where you would place your bet.
No, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to take it's more look at the odds. So I'm going to go with Takuma Sato. He's a 2-time winner. Ray Hall Letterman, actually. He's not with the big teams. And I don't know what happened to Penske as far as the qualifying goes, but they seem to be way in the back there. But they're still going to be fast. So Joseph Newgarden, Will Powell, I think you still have to look at those guys just because of the class. They're Penske at the Indy 500. I mean, that's a pretty good combination over the years. Trustworthy, and I'm not scared of the qualifying effort as much as I respect Penske overall. I think they're going to do well.
Let's run down those names one more time, slowly, one by one. I just want to make sure we get them for our listeners. So your choices would include Newgarden. Newgarden's about plus 1,400 over at DraftKings. You mentioned Will Power as well. I think he's plus 850 at FanDuel.
And Scott McLaughlin.
Okay, Scott McLaughlin, right?
And then Alexander Rossi with Andretti, just because,
Well, Rossi is ranging from plus 1,400 to plus 1,800 on DraftKings and FanDuel, respectively.
And that'll be good. I also have a soft spot for Juan Pablo Montoya. That was probably my greatest win. What was it, 2000? When it was like 14 to 1. I remember getting him. And I remember they were doing a test session. The Indy cars were in Las Vegas. And I went around the garage. I go, who's going to be best on this? Who's going to be fast? What do you think about Montoya when he comes? He goes, that car, no one's going to touch that car. He's going to roll. And these are like crew chiefs saying that Montoya, this was months before the 500, that he was going to dominate. And he did. And the books were laid on it, and I took advantage. And that's my Juan Pablo Montoya story.
Montoya. So of the value bets, and anyone outside of Dixon is essentially a value bet. What's the one name that stands out most for you?
Tony Kanaan, actually. I forgot about him. Tony Kanaan.
Tony Kanaan is about 16 to 1 over at DraftKings.
Yeah, I got a bunch here, but that's what you do. You have a few bucks. I expect to at least have a guy with 5-6 laps to go that has a shot to win. That's all I ask for.
Well, it's a little contrarian because of two things. Bucking the chalk favorite and Dixon being, one of the winningest drivers, actually just behind AJ Foyt and Andretti as the most successful driver in American Championship car history with 51 wins, trailing I think Foyt with 67 and Andretti with 52. So you've got Dixon, who's won at the track before. He's won 6 championships before, and he's in the pole position. And so I like the contrarian play because that's where the value is. Obviously, as a better. I'm curious about something, having followed racing forever. The numbers, when you do the pole position analysis, the historical analysis, we looked back at the what those numbers imply, and it generally says that the pole position wins 24% of the time.
Sure.
And second is 12%, and third is 14%. So 24, 12, and 14, that's 26, 20. That's 50% of your winners come from the first 3 positions in a 33 driver field. Yet, as you said, it's a 500-mile race. Why is that? Why does the pole position matter. Now in Monaco, for example, on a circuit, a chicane circuit with a lot of hairpin turns, it makes sense why it does when you drop speeds down to 30 and cars have gotten so wide and some of the tracks are so narrow. But that's not Indy. And I've got straightaways and why would the pole position matter so much historically? And is that changing over time?
I don't have it in front of me, but I know back in the older days, it was like everything. So the numbers, if we're going historically and we're going to start at 1911, I mean, the fastest car wins, but over attrition and everything else, and over the time, the crews, everything just meshes in. And I just don't find the start position as valuable as I used to have that thinking in my head. He's on the pole, he's going to win. It's like, not really.
Gotcha. Well, we will make a point of checking in with you on Friday. If you have any updates based on those times, we will post that on social media and let our listeners know how you've updated your thinking.
Excellent.
So, Mike, it's really been great having you on. You took us to school on autosports. It's not something we know much about, but as you said, the Indy 500's like the Derby. If it's on, you're going to watch it, and then to have a little bit more fun, you should probably bet it. So that's what we'll plan on doing this weekend. Remember, you can follow Micah on Twitter at Micah. That's Micah Roberts 7. Micah Roberts 7. And you can read his gaming columns and track his picks at sportsline.com as well. Micah, thank you so much for joining us. It was great to have you on.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day.
And Mike, where do we go from here?
As you know, Jeff, we have been busy at work these past couple weeks working on the latest June-July issue of Luckbox magazine, and it's a real heavy hitter. I think just about anyone whose life is touched by Amazon in any way is going to want to read this issue because it's an Amazon-focused issue. We go into a ton of different topics, from the labor relations issues to tax evasion to mergers and acquisitions. There's something in there for everyone, and it's really a must read.
No, that's right. The timing is good. We expect Amazon to be announcing their Prime Day any day coming up soon. It'll be sometime likely late June, maybe early July. Everyone's going to be looking for Prime Day deals, but I think in this issue we really focused on the subprime aspects of Amazon. So looking forward to sharing it. That drops this week, and of course that's free in digital form at getluckbox.com. So grab your latest hard look at Amazon. 95% of Luckbox readers use Amazon, so I think there'll be a lot of interest in this upcoming issue. I'll look for it. And that's all we have for this episode of the Prediction Trade. If you like what you heard, tell your friends about us and make sure that you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And check out thepredictiontrade.com to sign up for our newsletter and find us on social media or send us a message. You can also find the Prediction Trade in print in each issue of Luckbox magazine. Go to getluckbox.com/TPT to read the latest issue of Luckbox digitally for free. Thanks again for joining us. This is Jeff Joseph.
And I'm Mike Reddy.
And remember, always wager responsibly, believe in math, master your trade, and join us next time on the Prediction Trade.
Where do we go?